Hello, everyone. And thank you for joining this information session on the Australia-India Research Collaboration Grants. My name is Priya Rangan, and I'm the Principal Consultant for Government Projects at the Australia-India Institute. I am speaking to you from the land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and I pay my respects to them elders past, present, and emerging. The objective of today's information session is to enhance your understanding of the grants, including the details about eligibility criteria and the application process. Towards the end of the session, you'll have the chance to ask any questions that might come up in your mind. So please feel free to type your questions using the Q&A box provided. But before I go any further, I'd like to first introduce you to the CEO of the Australia-India Institute, the Honourable Lisa Singh, to tell you a little bit more about this grant opportunity and the Australia-India Institute's work in this space. Over to you, Lisa.
Thank you very much, Priya, and hello everyone that's joined for this information session. I'm sure you're all aware that education has been identified as the sector with the greatest promise for our Australia-India trade relationship, and as the flagship sector of our work here at the Institute as well. We are very pleased to be administering these Australia-India Research Collaboration Grants, otherwise known as the Unnati Research Collaboration Grants. The word Unnati is a Hindi word. It means to advance or progress. And so these new grants are very much anchored on the principle of that Hindi word Unnati, to advance the impact of research collaboration. These grants are funded by the Australian Government, the Department of Education, and the grants will provide additional funding to eligible Australian researchers working in priority fields. Research engagement, of course, between our two countries extends way back, many decades, and is supported by a range of bilateral agreements and funding initiatives. Research collaboration, though, is across our national boundaries, of course, can promote much stronger bilateral ties between our two countries, and that really is the foundation of the work here of our institute. Deepening that research collaboration to support research projects and achieve even greater impact and promote the exchange of knowledge and expertise between our two countries is so incredibly important. So if you are an Australian academic who has joined this session today, hopefully that's what you are, and that you're currently collaborating with India or seeking to broaden your research activities in India, then these Unnati grants could very much help advance your work, create lasting partnerships, of course, between our two countries, and build our people-to-people links. I would like to thank and acknowledge also, in terms of the Australian Government, Ms. Elizabeth Campbell-Dorning, the Director of South Asia Section of the International Quality Branch International Division for the Australian Government's Department of Education, for joining us today, and of course the Department of Education's strong support for the Institute, but also of course for this great initiative and for us to administer. I think also I would like to just acknowledge my colleague, Dr. Karen Barker. She's the Institute's Executive Manager and Head of Government Projects, and has chaired the steering committee of this process, which has guided the development of the grants program, and to thank all the committee members for their important contribution. Karen has taken some very well-deserved long service leave at the moment, so during her absence, we do have the wonderful Dr. Priya Rangan, who's just joined you to be holding the fort, and she will answer hopefully all of your questions today for today's information session. So thank you for joining us, and I'll very much encourage you to take advantage of this very rare opportunity. Thanks.
Thank you, Lisa. Now I'd like to welcome Ms. Elizabeth Campbell-Dorning, Director of the South Asia Section, International Quality Branch, International Division, for the Australian Government Department of Education, to say a few words about the grant.
Thank you so much, Priya. As leading democracies and strategic partners in the Indo-Pacific region, India and Australia have a lot of shared values, including a commitment to academic freedom and quality research. And in many ways, we're natural research partners. We share an interest in facilitating bilateral research in areas of shared challenges and finding shared solutions in areas that we're both facing, whether it is in the field of water security or healthcare or food security, environmental change, or the digital future. We know that we can achieve more together, and research in these fields, innovation in these fields underpins the growth of both Australia and India. And we're looking to increase activity in these areas, but also increase demand for both Australian and Indian education and research services. Mid last year, Australia's Minister for Education met with the Indian Minister of Education, and together they announced a number of projects to be facilitated through the expert support of the Australia-India Institute to deliver on their shared goals in greater research collaboration, including the Australia Research Collaboration Hub India, the ARCHI Hub, the Australia-India Research Student Fellowships Program, and these are the research collaboration grants that Lisa has so expertly explained. And we know that this builds on existing research collaboration and this existing work, especially being led by our research institutions, including our universities. So we're looking to extend that and create more of that expert research collaboration. I'm really encouraged to see so many people joining us today, and encourage you all to consider applying for a grant and continuing to play a role in strengthening our bilateral research relationship, creating knowledge, and building those lasting links between our researchers, but also between our institutions and our nations as well. So thanks again to you all for joining, but also to the Australia-India Institute for bringing this event together and bringing the Unnati grants to realisation as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for the department's support of the Unnati grants. We really appreciate that. So I think now what I will do is just lead everyone through a few slides, PowerPoint slides of what the grant is about, and then we can get to the questions and answers. And just to let you know that once we finish answering your questions, and we hope we will be able to do that in the time available, we will put up all of these questions in the frequently asked questions section on the website. So you don't need to worry if you haven't jotted down any of those answers to the questions. We'll try and keep them available for you there. So bear with me for a minute when I get this started. Righto. Well, okay, I think we've covered the name of the grants. These are focused. These are research collaboration grants, and they're called Unnati because it is about advancing and progressing the research collaborations that have been taking place over the years between scholars at Australian universities and Indian universities. So the idea is that these will be focused in four broad thematic areas, and each theme will get 3 grants, and that there is exactly, like there is a dozen altogether, a total of 12 grants that are available, but there will be 3 allocated to each of these priority research fields. And the grants will be administered by the Australia-India Institute. And as both Lisa and Liz have mentioned, they're funded by the Australian government's Department of Education. Okay, so the priority research fields, how did they come about? Well, during the 5th meeting, the council meeting, Australia-India Education Council meeting 2019, the education ministers agreed that there was need for deepening research collaboration, and these 4 broad themes were identified as encompassing a range of possible collaborations, which could be across disciplines or within disciplines, but they're about collaboration in more than one ways, not just between the 2 country researchers, but also across different disciplines between those 2 higher education institutions. So they were consciously identified in a very broad kind of way, so to allow for innovative and new possibilities of establishing research collaborations. So the grants are basically, they have 3 kinds of objectives, 3 objectives, not kinds, but 3 objectives. One is to boost and deepen existing collaborative research. So there may be people who are doing existing research, there are existing collaborations in these areas, and they want a little bit more resources to deepen the work that they're doing, increase the scope, deepen what in the direction of their research in that collaborative area. The second aim is to see if they can expand and deepen Australian researchers' connections with Indian researchers and industry. And this means that there may be Australian researchers who are working in particular fields in these priority areas. They're doing research in Australia, but then they are interested in perhaps expanding and doing collaborative research, comparative research, collaborative research with their Indian counterparts. So this is an opportunity for them to take that first step towards expanding the scope of their research into a kind of a collaborative relationship and extending that research agenda into the Indian context. And then the third one is about trying to strengthen the institutional linkages between Australia and India. And that might be through new kinds of connections, which may be trying to develop new relationships of collaboration, right? So broadly speaking, there are 3 potential project types, just based on what I've described to you. So there may be 3 types of applicants: those who already have secured funding for research, collaborative research, and are already working with Indian co-investigators. These are all targeted at people who are, broadly speaking, have well-established research projects and a track record, and who are already working in that area for several years, working with many Indian co-investigators. The second group may be people who already have secured some funding for research which is related to a priority field, and they're seeking to expand the scope of their research by including one or more, Indian co-investigators. And the third group are those who are looking for seed funding to find new to do new collaborative research with Indian co-investigators. They're looking to start working with Indian co-investigators. Now, these grants have actually been kind of targeted towards people who have already well-established research projects and collaborative projects. And so these are the ones that will be sort of given higher preference. But, there will be consideration for new seed funding requests, especially, if they're exciting, new, innovative, and, offer some excitingly important new collaboration opportunities between the two countries, between researchers in both countries. So when you apply, you will be asked to select one of the two options to fill out your forms. So that's just something you need to be aware of. Okay, so what's it about? Again, funding, 3 grants of 30,000 each for each research field, the total of 12 grants across the 4 research priority areas. Very tight. The time period is 6 months, and you have to finish your research activities between this time period. And the funds will be transferred to whoever the successful grantee's institution in 2 installments. So who is eligible? This is a very important thing, because this is actually aimed at Australian citizens. The principal investigator, it has to be one person, and they have to be an Australian citizen or a permanent resident of Australia. They should be employed in an academic position in an onshore campus of an Australian university, and who is doing research in one of these 4 priority fields. You could also be an individual or member of a research group. For example, you could be part of a you may already be part of a research project, like, for example, an ARC project, which has several investigators. You may be one of them, but you may not be the lead investigator. But you could potentially apply as independently as a PI for the Unnati grant, and you can choose to establish that, build your research on that collaborative project that you're already doing with another Indian co-investigator, right? And you can, and again, it's those 3 points, the 3 types of research that you can do. And then you have the issue of who is not eligible. So if you're holding an adjunct or honorary appointment at any of the Australian universities, then unfortunately, you're not eligible. And also any Indian citizens who are currently in Australia doing research at Australian universities, but who are on temporary work or activity visas, you are not eligible to apply. Okay, that's the details of the eligibility. The Indian co-investigator. So the Indian co-investigator must be employed at an Indian higher education institution. They could be already partners in some other collaborative project that they have been doing with the PI, with the Australian PI, but they must be employed at an Indian higher education institution. You must have at least one Indian co-investigator, but we have given the scope for multiple, up to 3 Indian co-investigators, depending on how the Australian PI wants to expand the scope of the collaboration, or the extent or deepening, how they want to do it. It gives them a little bit more room to think. Okay, uses of the grant funding. The money, the $30,000, is just inclusive of all taxes, all indirect costs, and so on and so forth. So that's your total sum of money. And within that, you can hire research and technical staff, research assistants, or some kind of technical people, lab work or whatever, specifically for carrying out the grant activities related to your Unnati grant. Right? This is about expanding. The Unnati grants is about what you're going to do in addition to what you've already done. So you need to actually talk about what the people that you're going to be using, or the things that you say you're going to do in terms of expanding or deepening or setting out something new. It may include essential travel between Australia and India, essential services, consumables, research equipment, and other essential costs. So we're using the word essential here because it's all related to what you're going to do within that 6-month period, and what you're going to be able to deliver for that period within that time frame, and what you consider, what you think is essential for doing that. And ineligible expenses, again, are those you can't use it for teaching relief and all of the things listed here. You can't use it for salaries, but you can, like I said, you can hire staff specifically for grant activities, research assistants, or anyone else that you need for doing these particular activities that you've outlined in your research proposal. You need to provide a budget using the table in the online application form. You need to provide a description of what activity you want to be funded, the justification why it's needed, and the amount. Yep. And we don't really know what kinds of outputs. We're not being very prescriptive here. We're giving you a range of ideas or suggestions of how you might think of what are tangible outputs. What can you actually achieve in terms of expanding and deepening and enhancing your collaboration? And it may be that you build a new data set, or you've got some new methodologies, techniques. This is something that's open, and that's why we've given you a few options. They're not prescriptive. It's up to you to tell us what you think are going to be tangible outputs, and how you're going to be able to deliver them. So the selection panels, each of the priority areas will have a selection panel, and that panel will review the applications to see if they're aligned with the aims of the grant. They'll look at the strength of the proposal, and what are the ideas, the research plans, the methods, what's the scope of the collaboration, which of these 3 things, how are they going to actually strengthen it? And then, like we've said, a realistic budget and activity time frame, completing the activities within the grant period. And also, they're going to look at what you write down as the outcomes and impacts of the research and the strengthening of the collaboration. So if you're successful, then you'll receive an offer letter and a grant agreement. And this is something that you and your home institution office, the responsible department or division, they will have to sign this and return the necessary papers back to Australia India Institute by the 8th of June. And the results will be, the successful outcomes will be communicated by the 31st of May or on the 31st of May. So you'll have a week to do all of the paperwork and then get started. You'll be required to submit a progress report, and we'll be putting up the template for the progress report later on. And that will have to be submitted by the 8th of September. And then you'll have a final activity report, which provides the full expenditure statement. And that'll be required by the 15th of December. And if you've got any unexpended funds, then they need to be returned by the specified date. Yeah. So the applications have opened and they're closing on the 15th of May. And I said, like I said, the notification of outcomes will be the 31st of May, and grant activity should be completed by the 8th of December, and the final activity reports have to be submitted by the 15th of December. So if you're ready to apply, please read the guidelines, very important, terms and conditions. You need to register on the Arch India Hub. You download the application form, look at it, prepare your answers. They're quite short, so you need to perhaps think things through carefully and then type it up and then cut and paste. So please prepare your resumes. We do not want long resumes. We just want 3 pages, very, very basic, essential information. And we know that most of you are very, very prolific in terms of publications and awards and so on. We don't want to see more than 5 publications, and they need to be relevant to the application that you're putting in. And you just need to apply online. And that's it from me. So I'm happy to answer any questions. Gosh, there are 17 questions. So I'm going to answer the first one. The first question is, what would be the name of the funding body, the name of the funding scheme? I think the answer is there. The answer is Unnati grants, research collaboration grants. So that's answered. In the cover sheet, Word file, there's a section, all additional chief investigators, including external chief investigators. No, they're not chief investigators. Those are not chief investigators. They are co-investigators. The term co-investigator is for your Indian counterpart. So, so that's regarding that. So we have a joint PhD program with IIT, and one of our PhD students has just completed. Can we use the funding to bring her to Australia to continue working on the project? She would be paid as a casual research assistant for a certain period, 3 months. We would like you to think carefully about what that person is going to do, what that research assistant is going to do to expand or deepen the collaboration in a new direction. What will they produce? What will they deliver? And what will the output look like? So that's the answer to that question. Okay, what is the FTE expected for Deakin lead investigator and Indian co-investigator. If we hire a casual research assistant to conduct the project, well, we do not want to be prescriptive about FTEs. It is up to you, and it's the scope of your project. And like we said, you can hire a casual research assistant with the funds, but again, you need to define what the output is going to be and how it is going to enhance or deepen or expand the research project that you've already done. You cannot repackage what you've already done and say that that's what you're going to do in 6 months, because that will not be looked on very favorably by the selection panel. So that's that. Okay, what is Deakin cash and in-kind contributions in the cover sheet? I'm not sure I understand that question. It's something that has to be worked out internally. I think every university has their own way of doing the internal costing and for grants. So that's something that you'll have to work out. But like we said, we are, I guess the in-kind contributions will be the time of the PI, and that's something that has to be sorted out within your organization by your responsible administrative division. So that's answered. Okay, sorry. I'm sorry, I'm trying to see this question. Can project take more than one theme? Can one PI submit more than one grant? Well, this is something that is up to the PI if they think that they can do multiple grants across different themes and they want to submit 2 different applications. It's up to them. The selection panel will be looking at the applications across, I mean, within their own specialist area, but they will also be sitting together to assess all of them together. So, so it's up to you whether you want to do that, and you think you can deliver on 2 themes within 6 months. This is going a little bit crazy. So would a new project with former collaborators fit in prioritized areas? COVID set things back. Okay. I think that we have in the guidelines indicated that if you have an ongoing, what we call an ongoing research collaboration, that could have been something that you have just completed within the past 5 years, we encourage that. We consider that as something that is existing. We have a time limit, but you could potentially put that forward. But again, it has to be something that you have to show is doing something more or different from what you were already doing in the past. So, does existing research with an Indian institute have to be in the form of an existing grant, or is collaboration over journals, paper writing considered equivalent? Yes, it's no, you cannot use a collaboration in writing a paper as an equivalent of an existing grant. An existing grant has to be something where you actually have the evidence, you have some research funds that you've been using to do this research project. So it's not just about writing a paper together. So that's, so please, that wouldn't be considered an existing collaboration. You have to have a grant. Okay, I have an existing collaboration in materials with an Indian investigator, and now I have to extend the collaboration in the healthcare field. Can I apply under existing collaboration? Yes, you can, because you're doing something in one area and you're taking it into another area. That's wonderful, and that's something that you can actually describe as a kind of expansion or extension in a new direction. That's quite possible. If this is about strengthening India-Australia relationship, should there not be equal consideration to those new ones? Giving preference to already existing work does not really help expand new projects and new academics into this relationship. That's a very strong and pertinent point, and we appreciate the difficulties we face. You see, this is why this is the first time we're putting this kind of initiative forward, and there was much discussion, and it was finally decided that preference would be given to people who wanted to who already had collaborations and who had grants that could actually hit the ground running, given the time frame of the project. And all I can say is that, you know, we've got people from the department looking at this quite closely, and if this is successful, we don't know, they may continue, they may actually be keen to look at these as expanding these new opportunities. But it's very clear that, you know, seed funding applications will be looked at, and if they are new and exciting areas, I think people will take them quite seriously. So we encourage you to give it a good shot, and we don't want you to feel discouraged. We do want you to give it a try, and you know, hopefully it works. What is the scope of new project or new collaboration? Well, it's something that you'd have to decide what the scope of your new project will be, because that's up to you. You have to decide how you want to take it in a new direction, or who you want to collaborate with in India. Maybe you've seen somebody doing exciting new research in India. They're in your field, you've never worked with them before, but you've seen their publications. So you reach out to them and you say, let's work on something together. So that could be, and then you could develop the scope accordingly. Can I include 2 Indian investigators from different Indian institutes? Yes, you can. And you have to work it out and discuss it with both of them and work it out in a good collaborative way, and get their approval when you submit the application. Would you explain what you mean by existing research collaboration activity well established? We have collaborations with an Indian institute commenced in April 2023. Would this qualify as existing? I guess it would, because it's existing before you apply for this. So technically it is. The merit should be based on the project and the deepening of the relationship and potential good research. I think your objectives are too narrowed into already existing projects. You're right. We acknowledge this issue, and I've given an answer for it. For the moment, this is unfortunately the constraints that we operate within for this particular grant for this year. So your point is taken. Gosh, I have a collaboration with an Indian university and projects that was not funded research. If I would like to apply, under which category should it be considered based on the 3 categories? Well, I think that if you have any other research grant fund grants that you've been using, then you could be potentially referring to that as an existing grant to then say that you're actually expanding your collaboration with the Indian university and provide the explanation. But if that doesn't work, it might be a seed funding application. You can think it through and see how you could apply depending on what kind of research grants you currently have. Thank you for this funding opportunity. I would like to ask about the selection panel. So the selection panel will be the selection panel will have a chair and members from Australia and India. There may be 3 or more, and they will all be experts in the broad field. They're people with a lot of experience and research in, collaborating in those particular priority fields. We have a joint PhD program with IIT, and one of our PhD students is just, I thought I'd answer that. Yeah. An Indian CI must be employed at an Indian higher. Is there more specific definition of India-based industry in terms of the cultural sector? For example, could a collaborator be a sole creative or from a creative industry? That's a very interesting question. Technically, I guess they are part of an industry sector in the cultural field, and there may be, that may be the case. I think I don't have a specific answer, but I think that should be possible. If you like, please send that question to us. We'll investigate and we'll get back to you on that. So can the funds cover any expenses on the Indian side, example, hiring an RA or travel from India to Australia? I think answered that. If you want to hire an RA in India, or you want to travel, if it's essential, you want to do that, the funds are there for you to spend, but as long as you know what you're going to be doing and it's realistic. Can researchers from an Indian private university be co-investigators? We are not sure if they're a university based in India, whether they're public or private is not a criterion for this, for eligibility. They're absolutely eligible to be co-investigator. Okay, project activities and collaboration are ongoing. So what do you expect to complete in 6 months? Is it okay if only a part? I'm not sure I quite understand it. If you're already doing a project and you don't, you want this fund, but the point is for you to apply if you're going to do something slightly more or different with these funds to enhance your research collaboration, not just, and you can do it within that short time period, but it can't be just something that you just add to whatever you're doing right now and say, okay, we've got another 30,000 in our current budget, so we'll just keep using it for the same thing. You have to actually articulate what your ongoing project is, and then you have to say, what are you going to do with this money in addition, which is going to be different from what you're doing currently and what you can achieve in those 6 months. So that's, I hope, a reasonable answer. Is ecology and conservation ecology part of the core research themes? I think that the priority area environmental change and energy futures would include ecology and conservation because it is about environmental change. So yes, you could see that as part of one of the priority areas. Are independent consultants living in India and consulting for Indian NGOs or any other organizations in India eligible to be one of the 3 co-investigators? Now, I will have to get back to you on this question about independent consultants. So this is something that we will get back to you on, perhaps through the frequently answered questions, or you could just send us this very same question through that question box in Arch India website, and we will get back. Thank you. Can one PI submit more than one grant? I've answered that question. It's up to them. And if they think they can finish it within 6 months and with their collaborators and produce good outputs, it would be wonderful. Can we involve independent consultant from India as a PI? You cannot have a PI from India. You can only have a co-investigator. And we don't know about independent consultants. We are talking about institutional relationships. Independent consultants, unless they are already part of or employed by existing institutions, Indian institutions, we don't consider independent consultants as higher education institutions in India, or research institutions, or industry institutions. But we will check up and let you know. Echoing Andrew May's inquiry, are social research and policy, social enterprises working closely at the intersection of governance eligible? If they are established organizations, and if they are research organizations, they have a reputation for research. Sure, I think that's quite possible. Yes, I think it is possible, but I will double check and we will answer that question. We have a collaborative project with Australia under Spark, which just ended. Will it be possible to apply for an extension? We would call that an existing project which ended in March. We would not consider an Unnati grant to be an extension of an existing project. We want you to actually tell us the application to tell us what the nature of that extended or new direction that you are going to take the project with the Unnati grant. Does the program include new emerging environment-based economy under environmental research? Like I said, these priority areas are very broad and also quite interdisciplinary if you look at it. So it is up to you to identify how you want to pitch your proposal under that priority theme of environmental change and energy frontier. Can equipment be purchased from this grant used in India? Yes, if it is something that is going to be relevant and essential for the project that you're going to be doing. Who would own the IP developed out of the project, the Indian side or the Australian side? This is a very, very good question. It is something that has to be properly negotiated between the collaborators. And this is something that we have mentioned in the terms and conditions, and you will see also in the section where we have asked you to think very carefully about the whole process of ethics of doing collaborative work. So please, it's a good question. Please go through it and discuss it carefully with your collaborators and describe it when you apply it in your application. I'm just looking at the time, and I'm going to try my best to cover as many as possible. I think there are. I'm not going to look. I don't think I'll be able to finish all the questions, but I'll try. Do we have to conduct the research in Australia or India or in both countries? It's up to you. It's what you can do in 6 months between your two parties. Do research topics based in Australia or India as well? It's something that the two parties should figure out whether they want to do the research in India or Australia or both. Could the collaborating partner in India be an NGO with federal research? Again, I think this question is coming up a fair bit, and I will have to seek advice and get back to you on it, and we'll try and get an FAQ written up on this as soon as possible. Should the new project be very close to the existing one? The new project should build on whatever research or take it in a new direction. It depends on your research activity, the grants that you've been having, and the research track that you have been following. So it's up to you to decide. Also, can the PI for this be the same as the PI for the current grant? The answer is you mean the existing grant that you're holding? Can you also apply for this Unnati grant? If that's the question, then yes. There are 3 grants for each theme, and there are 3 types of application, established, collaboration. Yes. Do you have the 3 grants for 3 types? I think we've answered that question. We generally give, unfortunately, the preference is for existing collaborations, or but we'll have to leave it to the selection panel to make their decisions, how they decide depending on the quality of applications and so on. So we can't tell you much about whether they will be allocated across the 3 types. Does a current joint funded PhD student count as evidence? This question has come up a fair bit, and we would say that it's something that you can put forward as a current, it is based on some sort of funding. So that should be all right. So would the funding agency require access ownership of IP generated through the collaboration? We would not be owning any IP. This is sort of typical of research. It's got to do with your institutions and the collaborators, how you make up your mind of how you collaborate, how you work out the details, and how you want the IP to be owned between yourselves. I have a joint program with IIT. The answer to that PhD program question, there's a joint PhD program with IIT Bombay. She's finishing her work soon. Can we apply for this funding for her project work? Will it come under existing research category? Yes, it will. Can we put her funding, existing funding in the application form as it is? No, you can't just ask for extra funds for her to do her project work. Is there any other India-Australia funding by AII for ECRs? Unfortunately, at this moment, I can only answer questions about this grant. So it's not something I can answer right now. So I think that there are loads of questions coming, and I cannot possibly answer all these questions, but I hope that from the answers that I have given to all the questions that have preceded, you will have a good idea of what the scope of the grants is, the grant program. I mean, the grants are, and how you could apply in these areas. So,
Priya, I think you've done a very good job in answering a number of questions, and I thank those that have submitted questions. I also want to give a shout out to thank our Arch India team who have been typing answers to a number of these questions to try and get through as many as possible. I will say just before you close, Priya, that we will be there will be a FAQ on the Arch India website that will hopefully answer some more of the questions you have. This is a really unique research grant opportunity. There are only 12 grants available at $30,000 each. So we do really encourage you to apply. But the Arch platform is there to provide that extra assistance and support. As a team, we're here to obviously assist. But I think there's been a bit of a theme with some of the questions today, and so a lot of those have been answered. And Priya, you've certainly done an incredible job in doing that. So thanks everyone for your questions. Priya.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you all for attending today's information session. Today's session has been recorded and will be made available on the Unnati Grants webpage. And as mentioned, we'll be adding all the questions today to the FAQ section, the key answers, and you can continue to submit your questions via the Arch India platform. Thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to receiving your applications. Good luck. Bye-bye.